me, I called again. Remind me of that question. But before I answer that question, I just want to point to the foolishness of sleeping with 50 men.
I knew Kev was not gonna let that go.
No.
Like, no, we ain't get past. Hold up, nigga. We ain't get past that shit.
Leave it past that. You gotta bring that back.
That you hear, if you're listening to other platforms, if you're listening to a lot of men on these different platforms when they're talking about there's no benefit of marriage, for the men and everything, where do you believe, in your own words, like where do you think all this pessimism is coming from? Like, let's leave out the whole divorce and taking half and all that shit. Let's go ahead and be a little bit more practical. If you want to say it's fear, go ahead and say it's fear, but in your own opinion, where do you think this pessimism is just coming from?
I think it's a mix of things. So just with talking to a lot of different men, the common consensus is that men have gotten the short end of the stick in marriage for decades, and they just kind of tolerated it because Black men specifically felt like they didn't have options outside of Black women. So it's kind of like you deal with what you can get in a way. And I think now with social media, men being able to connect from different parts of the US, of the world, they're kind of trauma bonding, as I like to call it, and discussing these shared experiences. And so that's what you're seeing in the comments of all of these videos. You're seeing all of these podcasts coming out because people are profiting off of people's frustration. So I think that's the underlying thing. But I also think that a lot of men now in this generation, so you have people who are, let's say 30 and under, for example. So they're giving examples of what women have done for decades, but I don't really think that's like firsthand experience or even seeing things that their father went through. Like they don't have a solid example of what a healthy marriage looks like. And so they're literally regurgitating what they hear on the internet. I can't tell you how many times I've heard men say this statistic about 80% of women initiate divorce. People never read studies, barely look into any statistics, but now everybody's saying the same thing. So it's kind of like buzzwords. So we're just kind of repeating what's popular at the moment.
So everything basically on YouTube is nothing but an echo chamber to you, right?
I think so. That's what makes money nowadays. So, yeah.
You ain't lying. Kev, go ahead. Empty the clip. Where's this pessimism coming from, man?
They're just sharing each other's trauma. Like you've seen people struggle with like alcoholism, crack, pick the thing, right? We've seen people struggle with that stuff. It traumatized us to view it. We traumatize ourselves with the news every day, right? Brother got shot by the police. Brother got ran over. Brother got shot. People doing all kind of crazy stuff to each other. When you go outside, do you feel less safe or more safe based on what you've seen somebody go through?
Shit, going outside, right. I feel less safe if we go by. Yeah.
You ain't been through half the stuff you've seen on the news, on a movie. But every day you prepare yourself for some imaginary situation that has happened somewhere to someone else. Through watching their trauma, you ingest it, you take it on, you absorb that same trauma. There's a study that shows that your mind, your body and your mind don't actually know what you've been through or what you haven't been through. The image and the effect is the same regardless of the trauma. If you see somebody go through something and then you take that on mentally, you start thinking about that, your body doesn't know that you didn't go through it. If you imagine somebody cheating on you, you imagine somebody disrespecting you, you imagine somebody taking half of your shit after you worked your whole life to develop some kind of wealth. Your mind doesn't know that you're imagining that. Your mind, your body literally doesn't respond as if it's a thought. Your body responds as if it's a reality, as if it's a truth, right? The brain studies that happen have shown that you don't actually know the difference between real and fake. You get a couple of million dudes sharing trauma stories, real experiences, regurgitated experiences, studies that might be true to one degree but aren't applicable to another. You get these guys in this echo chamber sharing the worst of the nature of women. All of these things are true. These things have happened. Most of what these guys complain about are realities. They've been realities to someone they knew, someone they heard on YouTube, whatever. I've known people who deal with I know some crazy, insane, ridiculous baby mamas that are the worst people in the world. My cousin's baby mama is probably the worst person, the worst human being in the world. If it was a contest, she would probably be up there, right? But I didn't take on that thought process with women. I didn't have to heal from that trauma. He did. I had to watch him yell at every woman after her for 10 or 15 years until he got with enough healthy women that just wasn't their communication style, right? You got all these millions of men who've been waiting on a woman to get put in her place. And when you run out of that, you have a bunch of men who felt like they've been put in their place by women or made to feel less than by women. So you add a reality to it. You add the fantastical horror story to it. And then you get a bunch of people who have a very real disdain and a very real misinterpretation of the totality of what womanhood is as it pertains to dating men. So yeah, they're not lying, right? To them, it's real. The fear is real. It's true. These things happen. Women are dastardly to some men, but 2 men will see 1 dastardly woman tell 2 million men, and now 2 million men see 2 million dastardly women. When really it's just 1 dastardly woman that affected 2 men, and now everybody's sharing it. Women do the same thing. In my comment section, bro, I can't mention what a woman can bring into a relationship to better herself and better her family and better her relationship without maybe 25 hate comments from women. We talk about men. We need to blame men. It ain't always about the woman. First of all, if you watch, I have 500 videos, 550 something. You watch 2-3 videos in a row, you realize, oh wow, he's covering the spectrum, right? I'm just giving you a perspective. Nothing is about blame, it's about accountability. And everybody needs to be held accountable. But you get 2 or 3 traumatized women in the comment section, it turns into 25 or 30. It turns into 200 likes under a really toxic ass comment that probably shouldn't be believed by anybody, let alone the 200 people that put the like button on it, right? People are just to her point, people are just regurgitating each other's trauma, and it becomes this trauma bond. But nobody's living their reality. They're only living everybody else's trauma. And even people who've perpetuated their own trauma with their decision making, with their patterns, with their habits, patterns, and practices, don't have to take responsibility for those things in those trauma echo chambers. So these guys who have cheated on women, who had karma coming to them, who made decisions on how to choose a woman based on booty size and bust size and hip to waist ratios, who just banged a chick who everybody wanted just because they wanted her, who just let their little thing decide everybody that they ever dealt with for every reason, every woman they ever been with, who can't control their members. These men have done stupid shit, and instead of taking that responsibility and say, you know what, I've actually increased my own trauma by doing this, that, or whatever, it's easier to just blame the women for the 4 kids they have running around that don't like them. Oh, she just be kids against me. I mean, that happens. I've seen it. But I've also seen more men who just don't follow through, who just didn't want to commit or marry, to your point, to marry, to commit, to dig into that responsibility and lean into it instead of avoid it. So
okay, so there's a comment from Simply Wadi. I believe that's how it's pronounced. She said, but we can learn what not to do or what to do from others. So I think that's true, but I feel like, and you kind of touched on this, Kevin, when people give you a bad story or a bad example of what happened to them, they're never really telling you their part that they played in it, right? So you're getting a very biased lens of what happened. I like to call it hyper awareness versus self-awareness. So we tend to be very hyper aware of what other people do wrong per se, but when it comes to that accountability factor, that self-awareness of how we played a role in situations, we don't really see too much of that. So yes, I think that we can learn from other people, but I always say keep in mind who the messenger is when you're receiving the message, because it's not going to give you a full spectrum. And I think that also a big issue is that men and women, we're not growing up with seeing positive examples of men and women, right? So if you're a woman, for example, who grew up and you saw amazing men, right? You have uncles, brothers, your father. You're not going to have one bad experience with a guy and say that's representative of all Black men, right? But if your dad wasn't shit, your uncles weren't shit, nobody was present, and then now you start messing with men who are displaying those same traits, and now that's how you see the entire group of Black men. So I don't know, I think we just have to be aware of those biases and how narrow our viewpoints can be as well.
We all ingest the trauma, but we rarely ingest the triumph, right? So not only don't we see the positive experiences There's this quote by, it might be Confucius or the Dalai Lama. It says, compassion is the radicalism of our time, right? Um, we've noticed that, not just people like myself, but whomever might step into an arena and say, hey, let's think these great things instead of these very negative things. They are immediately casted as a fraud. Someone's waiting for their downfall. They're waiting for them to misrepresent themselves or to be caught not being a good person, because people are generally very disdainful about the moral authority in the environment, right? Again, we ingest the trauma, but we completely reject the triumph, right? If we see a great person doing great, we wait for their downfall. If we see a great couple, we generally do the same thing. We're tired of this shit. Are they a cute couple? You don't know what's going on in their house, right? We immediately try to figure out how to humble the great and apply some kind of put shit on people's names. Honestly, I've seen people make up stuff about people's couples or relationships because, oh, this is just on social media. Or you see two people at a party all the time and they're actually respecting each other, and the woman's not flirting with the guys and the guy's not looking at butts. They just come as a couple, respect each other, leave as a couple, and hang out with friends. Oh man, y'all don't know what's going on in their house. Anybody says, oh my God, they're such a cute couple. It's always that, because we're waiting for the trauma. We're so traumatized that we actually hate the triumph, right? And so it's so much easier for the world on social media to point toward the tragedy, make the viral moment the negative moment, or make the popular opinion the most negative, the most insulting to the opposite group, because again, sharing the trauma than it is the triumph. People always say, oh my God, you should be more famous, you should be more. And I said, look at all the integrity content creators. It's an uphill battle for every integrity content creator. If you look at any content creator that's not chasing a viral moment, that's just giving wise advice that might not be viral, but damn it, it could change somebody's life. Look at the numbers compared to that, and pick the bottom of the top 10 red pill, or pick the bottom of the top 10 even on the female side of it. The woman, I'm not that woke, y'all, so I still say female. My bad. I'm not that damn woke. I ain't got time for that level of woke. But pick the lady that even in that, the most negative people, the most viral moments are the moments that either are two people bickering, two people bashing each other, two people arguing, somebody being put in their place, someone being humbled, or somebody saying some shit that you just can't believe that came out of their mouth. That's the viral moment. You've had trouble growing your audience as compared to, I don't even know none of them guys' names, O'Shea, Duke, Jackson, because you provide balance and you have respect for women, and you have a wife and you have kids and you are loyal to them, right? I'm sure, I don't even have to look at your content. Now, there's pretty people privilege out here. I would imagine you got some of that love and respect, but you're clearly you're a gifted mind, and you're also very studied and clearly practiced, and you care about what comes out of your mouth and the impact of your words. I would bet that next to, I won't say the young lady's name, but she's also very beautiful, but she just says a bunch of dumb shit all the time, and she's always going viral for saying something stupid. If I looked at your numbers and I looked at her numbers, and the rapidity is not a word, but it's going to be one a day, how rapid her climb was, right? I would bet she moved at 10 times the rate that you're growing at, because you're stepping with integrity and you're moving with purpose, and your spirit's involved. It's not just your ego trying to show everybody how viral you can be and how smart you can be and how quick you are, right? Again, it's that negativity that people respond to. So I'm sorry, I don't mean to monopolize the conversation. Love and respect. But that's why that shit's so popular, and that's why the anti-marriage movement has gotten so pervasive, because it's easier to gravitate toward. For whatever reason, negativity is more magnetized.
Is that word really that wicked to the point where that independence kicks in the mentality of a woman now?
Yes, it's definitely a misunderstanding of the word. I know we said that we're just gonna blame men, but
yeah, let's blame
I
the
will
men.
also say, like, I'm on both sides though. It's like I think men also don't understand it either. And I realized I had a conversation where we were discussing the idea of submitting to one another, which is kind of like what you alluded to in a marriage. And men were like, absolutely not. Submitted to my wife, that sounds crazy. And I'm like, okay, so what is it that you guys think that means, where that has a negative connotation?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of people will say submitting is like you said, scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush and doing whatever your partner says, right? But it means more than that. I think a big thing going back to women though is that we are very attached to this state of hyper independence. And that is a result of trauma, which I don't know if people realize that or not. But when you go through instability in your childhood, whatever the case may be, you are a high performer in your career. In school, you cling to your independence because that's kind of like what your sense of worth is. And so I think the idea when women hear submitting, letting go of that power, that's triggering because it's like, okay, but this is what I've held on to my entire life. This is my sense of stability. So giving that to another person, that's scary for me and I don't like it. And so I think that piece is what we really need to tap into. But I do think that to some extent, as a defense mechanism, we'll say, well, no, you want me to submit because you're trying to control me because we don't want to face why we really have an issue with that.
Oh, let me throw it. Hold on, okay, I'm gonna let you jump in. I gotta ask you this one. Is there a thin line between so-called independence and relying on your man?
Yeah, I mean, I think women in general, we struggle with that for multiple different reasons. So it's the power thing, like that's a big thing, letting go of control. But I think also if you have abandonment issues, if you kind of feel like you start to open that door where you let someone in and they start to do for you, it's kind of like an upper hand, right? And so you fear that that person, they might walk away and take everything away from you, that sense of stability, that sense of comfort, that security. So I think it's all of that honestly wrapped into one.
Ooh, hold on. Okay, Kev, go ahead and empty the clip. I need you to go ahead and break that because no, that was amazing what you just said, and I think people need to like really hear this. Kev, difference between power and leadership, is it convoluted?
You know, people's idea of power and leadership has been one of the bigger misunderstandings. I mean, hell, we could even biblically. People are still arguing about things that were written 10, 13,000 years ago. Like, if you look at, you could have two people read the same quote or a scripture from the Bible, or even the book that the Bible was derived from. Like, you could literally take the oldest piece of text in just anybody's ever found. If it pertains to men and women, there's a person who's going to take that text and give the man power, and there's a person who's going to take that text and either give the woman power or try to make it balanced. But there's always this different interpretation, and the idea of power and leadership has been one of the biggest misunderstandings in mankind, right? I just did a video last week, and I was talking about at that point I was talking about a man's rights over his wife and a woman's rights over her man or her husband. There are Bible quotes that says a woman is not her body is not her own but her husband's. And generally people stop there, but the second verse is that a man's body is not his own but his wife's. And people will sit in church and argue about who's supposed to be superior and who's supposed to submit, but there's as many verses in the Bible that outline a man's submission to his wife that outline a woman's submission to her husband. It's always going to be an issue because to winning than they do cooperating as a team. Right? So submission for me in my house, to your point, submission for me is like, it goes both ways. It's a two-way street, right? My wife is smarter than me in some ways. I don't pretend to be better at organizing things or better at understanding quick data, or I don't pretend to have some of the skill sets that she has. She also doesn't compete with me for the things that I'm gifted with. She also doesn't get in my way when I need to be in charge of a decision, right? We listen to each other, we cooperate, we work together for the betterment of the team. The idea of submission, as given to the community we do not speak of, is in general a man ruling despite his qualification, a man ruling despite his confidence, a woman following despite her competence, and despite her capability, right? And despite the lack of leadership that she might be under. So to your point, hell yes, it's a huge misunderstanding, but I don't think it'll ever go away. Think about this. In our world, we have so many power dynamics at play at all times, right? I'm not going to turn this to a race thing, but we are familiar with this concept of white power.
Right.
Will it ever die? No. Will it ever go away? No. Will there always be a superiority complex that we as a people have to deal with? Even if socioeconomically, we all banded together, got our paper right, got our reparations, did everything, invested the reparations, became the richer of all the racial societies, we would still be looked down on because of superiority complexes, right? People can see racism from the damn moon with a magnifying glass. But if you point out sexism, these same men don't know what you're talking about. All of a sudden, now you don't know nuance. Now you can't read between the lines. Now you don't understand oppression, right? It's because it takes from them the power dynamic. So it's not we call it a misunderstanding, but they're committed to the misunderstanding, which means they understand very perfectly what's going on, right? Just like white superiority, we know people know what's going on. They wouldn't trade places with us. They don't want to be treated like us. But if you ask them about, hey, was that a little racist? They're like, I don't know about that. I think you're taking it too far. Playing the race card again. Men do the same thing. They can't see sexism if you punch them in the face. So for me, it's not as much of a misunderstanding as it is a commitment to power. White superiority commits to power over the rest of the world. The rest of the world must bow or they must be dealt with. We have nuclear war at the ready to save white power. Men, if they had nukes, would have already pushed the red button numerous times to save male superiority. With love and respect to men, of course they built a society, but all of them come through this world through a woman. So how the hell are we going to keep talking about how men can live and we could do everything, nobody needs a woman, but you all come from a woman. You built the building, she built you. Figure that out. Like, it's not a misunderstanding, it's a commitment to power. It's a commitment to the dynamic of winning over losing. It's a commitment to the superiority. That's what this whole thing, it's not a misunderstanding. It's just a commitment, and we're on the wrong side of it.
People are always going to protect their privilege, and I don't think, for those reasons, I don't think we'll ever have equality. And I mean, again, I like to play devil's advocate. There are privileges that women have as well, and like those, and I'm sure we wouldn't want.
We about to lose some subs, Ty.
We start talking about paying for dates or doing hard labor things. Like, we benefit off the fact that we're women, and we typically don't have to do that. If you ask most women if they would want to change that, they probably will not. So there's always going to be things that we benefit from more than another group of people that we want to protect, whether we realize it or not.
Are men to blame for dating decisions? Now, the reason why I brought this up is because I saw a video, I think it was on TikTok. TikTok is a mess. This girl smashed, I want to say like over like 50 men or whatever. And ladies, you do what you do. But the reason why she says she kept on smashing is because the dick wasn't right. So until she got some good D, she was just going to keep on sleeping with men. That was just how she do. You do your thing and everything. So, Ty, I wanted to go ahead and throw this one at you. So now that we had a young woman who blamed men for having bad sex, because if she would have found one who gave good sex, she would have settled down with him. That was her logic upon it. That was her logic. Like, well, if he got good D, that's what I'm going to commit to. That's where I'm paraphrasing, but that's what she said.
Not one.
No, she ain't found. I know. Look, your content is your content. Like that. But I wanted to throw this one at you. I did. So, regardless if there is dad in the home or not, are we really the common denominator for a woman's dating decisions today?
No, I mean, I think a lot of it is just knowing who you are as a person, because when you are confident within yourself and you know what it is that you want, there could be a lot of bull out there in the dating pool. As we say, the dating pool has pee in it, but you won't entertain it because you're going to stand firm in your values and you wait for what you want to come along. So no, I mean, I think that if you feel like you have to waver just for the sake of settling, you're fearful that you won't find somebody, that's more of a you thing. But I would never say that someone else is responsible for my dating choices. There's good men out here. I have this conversation all the time. I think that most women would be lying if they said that there are no good men. He might not look the way we want him to look. Maybe he might not make as much money or whatever the case may be. He might not have the status that we want. But there are good men. So I don't think that can be discounted. And it's kind of like what Kev was alluding to before. It's like confirmation bias, right? So you ignore, you have blinders on to everybody who contradicts what your belief system is, but you focus on the people who prove your points to be correct. And I feel like that would play a big role. But no, that's crazy.
Status. How many of these women were really dating on them, depending on a man's status?
Remind me of that question. But before I answer that question, I just want to point to the foolishness of sleeping with 50 men.
I knew Kev was not gonna let that go.
No.
Like, no, we ain't get past. Hold up, nigga. We ain't get past that shit.
We're past that. You gotta bring that back. The young lady has laid with 50 men who didn't know her. Yeah, over 50 men who didn't know her and therefore wouldn't know how to perform with her by chance unless they just did the thing that she naturally likes. They were the perfect size and girth and all of it. There's so many factors to having a great first sexual experience that the foolishness of sleeping with 50 men to find one good sexual experience just tells me that this young woman doesn't first know what she likes, is looking for someone else to show her what she likes, and also has endangered herself 50 times over to all kind of diseases, getting pregnant, all of the different risks involved in sex, because she doesn't know how to communicate her needs to a man.